Welcome back to Mr. Terrifying. Tonight's story came from one of our listeners, who was just doing something we all do every single day, driving. Just a regular road, a normal night, and a decision to stop for gas that changed everything. This story was sent to us by Mark Holloway. And before we get into it, I just want you to know one thing. There was something wrong with his car that he had no idea about. Something someone else had done. Now let's get into it. If you drive alone at night, especially on long, empty roads, you need to listen to this. Because what happened to me on Highway 59 in rural Texas is something I still can't fully explain. And the worst part? It started as the most normal night of my life. It was a Tuesday in October. Late October, when the air gets that bite to it and the sky turns dark by 5:30. I was driving back from a job interview in Houston, a 6-hour drive back to my apartment in Shreveport, Louisiana. The interview had gone well. I was in a good mood. I had a full tank of gas, a bag of chips on the passenger seat, and a playlist I'd been putting together for months. Life felt simple, manageable, good even. I should have flown. My sister told me to fly. She said, buy the ticket, it's like $90. And I told her I liked the drive, I liked the open road, I liked having time to think. I wasn't thinking clearly at all. I see that now. I left Houston around 8:15 in the evening. The first couple of hours were fine. Traffic thinned out fast once I got past the suburbs and into the long, dark stretch of East Texas. The trees on either side of the highway got taller and closer together. The lights from other cars became rarer. My headlights started to feel like the only real things in the world. Around 10 o'clock, I noticed my gas gauge was sitting lower than it should have been. The car was a 2019 Camry I'd borrowed from my cousin, and I wasn't familiar with how quickly it drank fuel. I figured I had maybe 40 or 50 miles left in the tank. Plenty of time to find a station. Except if you've ever driven through deep East Texas at night, you already know where this is going. The exits started getting sparse. I passed one for a town called Corrigan, but I'd been in the left lane behind a slow-moving truck and missed the ramp before I even registered it. I told myself the next exit would have something. Gas station, convenience store, something. I drove another 12 miles. The next exit sign said the town was 4 miles off the highway. I took it. The road was pitch black, no streetlights, just my headlights cutting through the dark and pine trees pressing in from both sides like walls. I drove the 4 miles. There was a gas station, a small, old-looking gas station with one of those tall, faded signs that flickered every few seconds. 2 pumps, a tiny convenience store attached to it. The lights inside were on. I pulled in, got out, and breathed in that cold night air. There was nobody else there. Just my car and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. I started pumping gas and took a look around. It was quiet in the way that places get at night when they're far enough from the highway that you can't even hear the road. I finished pumping, went inside to grab a coffee and use the restroom. The man behind the counter was maybe 60, heavy-set, wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He barely looked at me, gave me a nod. I grabbed the coffee, a bottle of water, paid in cash, and went back to my car. And that's when I noticed the other vehicle. It was parked on the far side of the lot. A white pickup truck, older model, engine off. I hadn't heard it pull in. I hadn't seen headlights. It was just there, parked at an angle partly in shadow with no one visibly inside from where I was standing. I didn't give it too much thought. I got back in the car, locked the doors out of habit, sipped my coffee, and pulled back onto the dark 4-mile road toward the highway. I merged back onto Highway 59 heading east. The coffee was hot, but it helped. I started to relax. About 8 miles later, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Now, headlights on a highway are not unusual. That's not the thing. The thing was the distance. They were close. Not dangerously close, not road rage close, but closer than felt normal for an empty highway where you could literally move into either lane freely. The headlights just sat there, maybe 6 or 7 car lengths back, steady. Not gaining, not falling back. I told myself it was nothing, someone else heading east, probably going to Nacogdoches or somewhere further up the road. I moved into the right lane to let them pass. They moved into the right lane. I moved back into the left lane. A few seconds later, they moved back into the left lane. My stomach dropped. I pressed the gas a little, not dramatically, just enough to create more distance. The speedometer climbed from 70 to 82. The headlights stayed with me. Same distance, like they were attached to my car by an invisible cable. I tried to think clearly. I was on a highway. I was in a moving car. I was safe. I took a breath and deliberately slowed down, dropping to 60, thinking maybe they'd just pass me and it would all dissolve into nothing. They slowed down too. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I reached for my phone and tried to call my sister. No signal. 1 bar, then none. East Texas, man. I tried again. Nothing. I looked in my mirror and tried to make out the vehicle. In the dark, with the glare of the headlights, I could just barely tell it was a truck. A light-colored truck, sitting high. An older model, maybe. A white pickup truck. The same one from the gas station lot. The one I hadn't heard pull in. Now my brain started moving fast. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the guy just happened to be heading the same direction. But then, why the lane changes? Why the exact same following distance no matter what I did? I checked my fuel gauge. 3/4 full. Good. I could drive for hours. I needed a plan. I couldn't just sit on this empty highway hoping they'd give up. I needed other people. Lights. A town. A police station. I grabbed my phone and waited for a single bar to appear, and when one did, just barely, just for a second, I went to Google Maps and typed in police station. It buffered, but it showed after a few seconds. The nearest was in Nacogdoches, about 22 miles ahead. I memorized the exit. The headlights were still there, still the same distance back. I drove at a steady 70. I watched the mile markers, 18 miles, 15. The headlights stayed with me the entire time. Through every slight curve in the road, up every shallow hill, consistent and patient in a way that felt deeply wrong. Whoever this was, they weren't in a hurry. They weren't trying to catch me, they were just following, waiting, 12 miles out, 10. Then my tire blew. Not a slow leak, a full blowout. The back right went with a sound like a gunshot, and the car lurched to the right. I gripped the wheel with everything I had, fighting the pull, keeping off the brake the way I'd once heard you're supposed to. I managed to slow down and pull onto the right shoulder, heart slamming against my ribs, hands shaking. I sat there for a second in the dark, and then, in my rearview mirror, I watched the white truck slow down. It didn't pull over behind me. It didn't stop on the shoulder. It slowed to maybe 30 miles per hour and rolled past me in the right lane. Slow enough that I could see, just barely in the darkness, the silhouette of a driver behind the wheel looking toward my car as they passed. Then it sped up again and disappeared down the highway. I sat there for what felt like 5 minutes but was probably 30 seconds. Then I started thinking practically. I had a blown tire. It was 11:40 at night. I was on an empty Texas highway. I did not want to get out of the car. I checked my phone. Still no signal. I turned on my hazard lights. The orange blink of them against the darkness felt lonely in a way I can't properly describe. I decided I had to try changing the tire. My cousin had told me there was a spare in the trunk. I'd never changed a tire in my life, but I'd watched it done. I popped the trunk, grabbed the jack and the spare and started working, moving as fast as I could, checking the road every 30 seconds. 7 minutes in, I had the flat off and was working the spare onto the bolts when I saw headlights again, coming from the direction I'd originally come from the west. Moving slowly, too slowly for highway speed, I stood up, stared. It was a vehicle, moving maybe 25 miles per hour in the right lane, coming toward me, coming back. My body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the October air. I had maybe 60 seconds before it reached me. I threw the flat into the trunk, didn't tighten the lug nuts, didn't put the jack away. I jumped in the car, put it in drive, and pulled back onto the highway, hazard lights still blinking. I floored it. I don't know how fast I was going, probably 90, maybe more. The spare was not tightened properly and the car was pulling slightly to the right, and I did not slow down. In my mirror, the slow-moving headlights sped up. Suddenly they were moving fast again. Following again. 9 miles to Nacogdoches. 8, 7. I kept my eyes split between the road and the mirror. The headlights were gaining. I pushed past 95 and the car started to feel unstable, vibrating in a way that scared me, but I thought about pulling over again, thought about being alone on that shoulder in the dark. And I kept my foot down. I hit the outskirts of Nacogdoches at 6 miles over and didn't care. There were street lights. There was a gas station, other cars on the road. The headlights behind me had dropped back when I entered the city limits, and by the time I turned toward the police station, they were gone. I pulled into the parking lot of the Nacogdoches Police Department at 12:19 in the morning. I sat in the car for almost 3 full minutes before I could make myself get out. Inside, a desk officer, a woman in her 40s with reading glasses and a patient expression, took my report. She listened to everything, wrote it all down. She told me she'd put out a notice for a white pickup truck on Highway 59. She didn't dismiss me. She brought me a cup of water. They never found the truck. I stayed at a motel in Nacogdoches that night. I didn't sleep. Every time I heard a vehicle outside, I went to the window. Every time the parking lot was empty, I stood there staring at it for a while anyway, just to be sure. In the morning, they had a mechanic come look at the spare. The lug nuts were loose like I'd figured. What the mechanic also found was that the valve stem on the blown tire had been tampered with. Not worn down, not failed from age, physically tampered with. He said someone had done it deliberately, and that at highway speeds it was only a matter of time before it blew. He said it like it was a neutral fact, like he'd seen things like this before. I asked him when it could have happened. He said it was hard to tell exactly, but it would have required someone to spend at least a minute or two with the tire, probably at a stop. I thought about a gas station with one flickering light and two pumps and a white truck parked in the shadows at an angle I hadn't paid attention to. I thought about how long I was inside getting coffee. I thought about how whoever was in that truck had watched me get back in the car. Waited until I was 12 miles down an empty highway, then followed me from a careful, patient distance, waiting for the tire to blow, waiting for me to be stranded and alone and miles from anything. I still don't know what they intended. I don't know if they followed other people that night before me or after me. I don't know who they were or why they chose my car in that lot, or if it was random, or if something about me felt like an easy target. I drove home a different route the next day, took the interstate, stayed in the right lane, checked my mirrors every few minutes for the entire 4 hours. I've done a lot of driving in my life. Long trips, late nights, early mornings. I've always been the kind of person who finds something peaceful about the open road. That feeling, that particular kind of American freedom, just you and the highway and the radio, is something I grew up loving. I don't love it anymore. And if you're planning a long drive tonight, especially if it's dark, especially if it's rural, especially if you're alone, please, before you get back in your car, take a slow walk around it. Look at the tires. Really look. Check the valve stems. Make sure nothing looks touched or different or off. It takes 30 seconds. And it might be the 30 seconds that saves your life. Because the scariest thing about what happened to me isn't the blowout or the empty highway or the white truck in my mirror. It's that whoever was in that truck knew exactly what they were doing. They'd done it before. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there tonight on some dark stretch of highway in America, they're doing it again. If this story got to you, hit that like button. And if you're new here, subscribe to Mr. Terrifying. Drop a comment below. Tell me, would you have kept driving or